Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nurzaitin binti Muhammad Ismail and my metric number is 1172089. My research title is Exploring Variabilities and Similarities in the Topics of Destructive Acts, perkara-perkara yang membinasakan, between Cyrus Salikin manuscript and the translated Malay book of Kitab Ihya Ulumuddin, a comparative study. Let's move on to background of the research. Islamic manuscripts have received less attention, especially among students in recent decades. Manuscript writing first appeared in the late 16th century, and the existence of the manuscript was due to the discovery of printing. I propose to study these differences and similarities found in the manuscript of Cyrus Salikin by Al-Falimbani and the Malay translation of book Kitab Ihya Ulumuddin by Imam Al-Ghazali in the topic of destructive acts, perkara-perkara yang membinasakan. Therefore, I am very inspired to discover this field because I focus on the subject of the original copy, and this study focuses on contrast data and similarities between the original manuscript and the Cyrus Salikin and the translated Malay book of Kitab Ihya Ulumuddin.
Move on to the problem statement. For many years, Kitab Jawi has been known to have played a vital role in transmitting the knowledge of Islam to the Malay people in the Malay-Indonesian archipelago since 15th century. It has been used by the Malay scholars as a medium of education in imparting the knowledge and understanding of Islam. The Cyrus Salikin manuscript comprises of 4 volumes. The book itself was a commentary on Imam Al-Ghazali's book of Ihya Ulumuddin and was written in a classical Malay script. The description of the book presented in this work focuses only to the first 10 chapters of the 3rd volume of the Sire. This research will explore and make comparisons on the variabilities and the similarities between the original content in the Cyrus Salikin manuscript and the book of ancient Jawi, Kitab Ihya Ulumuddin by Imam Al-Ghazali in the topics of perkara-perkara yang membinasakan, destructive acts. To fulfill this purpose, research study will analyze the past researches about this study and compare the content in the book of Ihya Ulumuddin. Research objectives. There are 3 research objectives in this research study. First, to demonstrate a comparative study between Cyrus Salikin and the book of ancient Jawi, Kitab Ihya Ulumuddin in the topics of destructive acts. Second, to find out what are the similarities and the differences between the manuscript and the ancient book of Jawi. Third, to analyze the qualities on the topics of destructive acts of Cyrus Salikin and Ihya Ulumuddin. Research questions. First, what is the feasible comparative study between manuscript and the book of ancient Jawi, Kitab Ihya Ulumuddin in the topics of destructive acts? Second, what are the similarities and the differences between the manuscript and the ancient book of Jawi? Third, how to analyze the qualities on the topics of destructive acts of Cyrus Salikin and Ihya Ulumuddin? Move on to the literature review. Ahmad M. H. mentioned in his article entitled Abdul Samad Al-Falimbani's Role and Contribution in the Discourse of Islamic Knowledge in Malay World about the Abdul Samad Al-Falimbani's role and contribution in the discourse of Islamic knowledge in Malay World, for example in manuscript work on Cyrus Salikin. Researcher Marzuki Abu Bakar stated in his article entitled Kitab Jawi dan Kontribusinya dalam Kajian Islam di Kepulauan Nusantara about the Javanese books are still a source of study and reference material in Islamic studies is good in Indonesia, Malaysia and Thailand. Meanwhile, researcher Maurice Megawati mentioned in his article entitled The Malay Syarah Commentary of Al-Ghazali's work shows on Al-Ghazali's work by looking at the translations and commentaries of local scholars of his work into Malay. For example, in Cyrus Salikin led by scholars such as Abdul Samad Al-Falimbani and Daud Al-Patani, the research was being conducted using the translations and commentaries of local scholars of his works into Malay. It has been proven that these Malay commentaries began in the 18th century, led by scholars such as Abdul Samad Al-Falimbani and Daud Al-Patani. So, it can be concluded that the research is important because it highlighted the comparison between the manuscripts that have been contributed by the scholars from the 16th century to the translation that been made by the translated Malay ancient book of Jawi by the scholars who have been translated during 18th to 19th century. It is also stated that the translated Malay ancient book of Jawi very important contribution to the study of Islam in the archaeology. It is hoped that the translated Malay ancient book of Jawi will continue to be preserved by making it a source of study, reference, and Islamic study material in the archaeology. Move on to the significance of research. This study will be a significant endeavor in comparing the content of the translated Malay book of Ihya Ulumuddin by Imam Al-Ghazali with the manuscript of Cyrus Salikin by Al-Falimbani. Throughout this study, a qualitative data produced will be used to show this comparison and identify clearly the differences and the similarities between manuscripts of Cyrus Salikin and Kitab Ihya Ulumuddin in the topic of destructive acts. Next, this study will also be beneficial to students especially who are doing their master's or PhD thesis and lecturers in finding the differences and the similarities in both content. Moreover, this research will provide a guide and helps the other researchers to analyze the quality in both of the content. This research will be a really helpful and relevant for the others that might be comparing the works of Al-Ghazali with the original manuscript by Al-Falimbani. Next, it will also serve as a future reference for researchers on the subject of manuscript in the topics of destructive acts. And importantly, this research will educate the students and lecturers to be more understanding in this field of study. Therefore, it is anticipated that this research would generate a great deal of interest not only among students but also among the general public. It is hoped that this research study will be the beginning of an ongoing body of research specifically in the topics of destructive acts, as there are not many of us realize about the importance on doing this kind of research. Next, we move on to the research methodology. The type of research design that has been used in this study is a qualitative design. This research design has been chosen because it is a comparative study in the content between the Cyrus Salikin manuscript and the translated Malay book of ancient Jawi, Kitab Ihya Ulumuddin, in the chapter of Perkara-perkara yang membinasakan destructive acts. The method of data collection used in this study is a content analysis, which is the document analysis. In this research study, I will be exploring the comparison in the content of the Cyrus Salikin manuscript by Al-Falimbani and the Kitab Ihya Ulumuddin by Imam Al-Ghazali. A research instrument is a tool used to collect, measure, and analyze data related to the subject. In this study, the researcher itself becoming the data collection instrument. Moving on to data analysis. A descriptive analysis have been used in this research study. A descriptive analysis is the term given to the analysis of data that helps describe, show, or summarize data in a meaningful way, such that, for example, patterns might emerge from the data. Meanwhile, the tools of analysis used in this research study, it is a manual analysis.